September 2020. In the desert outside Luxor, Egypt, archaeologists were looking for something they already knew should be there, a temple. More specifically, they were searching for the mortuary temple of Tutankhamun. But beneath the sand, they found something they weren't expecting. A wall. Then another. Then another. And as the team continued excavating, those walls began connecting into streets, rooms, workshops, ovens, and entire sections of a settlement. They weren't standing on the remains of a temple. They had uncovered a city that had been buried for roughly 3,000 years. And here's what makes the discovery so remarkable. This wasn't some unexplored corner of Egypt. This was Luxor, ancient Thebes, one of the most intensively studied archaeological landscapes on Earth. So how did a substantial ancient city remain hidden here for so long? And more importantly, what can this city tell us about the people who actually lived through the golden age of ancient Egypt? Around the 14th century BC, Egypt was at the height of the New Kingdom. Its rulers controlled a powerful empire, enormous wealth was flowing into the country, and monuments were being built on a scale that still dominates Luxor today. One of the most powerful rulers of this period was Amenhotep III. He ruled Egypt for decades, overseeing an era of enormous construction and political power. And somewhere during his reign, a settlement was established on the western bank of the Nile. For thousands of years, it disappeared beneath the landscape. Until 2020. The archaeological team wasn't originally searching for a lost city. They were looking for Tutankhamun's mortuary temple in an area between known monuments. Instead, excavation revealed mud brick structures extending far beyond what they expected. The more they cleared, the more organized the site became. This wasn't simply a pile of collapsed buildings. There were streets, rooms, walls, work areas, and evidence of different kinds of activity taking place across the settlement. The excavation revealed residential areas alongside administrative and industrial spaces. There were ovens and areas associated with food production. There were workshops. There was evidence of manufacturing. And there were objects that gave archaeologists clues about the people who once worked and lived there. This changed the question completely. The team was no longer asking, "Where is Tutankhamun's temple?" Now they had to ask, what exactly was this city? And the first major clue came from the bricks themselves. Some carried the royal name of Amenhotep III. That gave archaeologists an important connection between the settlement and the reign of one of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. But the city had another name. The archaeological evidence connected it with the rise of Aten. And that name becomes especially interesting when you look at what happened in Egypt immediately afterward. Because Amenhotep III was followed by one of the most controversial rulers in Egyptian history, Akhenaten. Akhenaten dramatically transformed Egypt's religious system, elevating the Aten, the solar deity represented by the sun disk, and moving the royal court away from Thebes to a new capital at Amarna. So this settlement existed around a major turning point in Egyptian history. And that makes it far more valuable than a collection of old walls. It gives archaeologists a glimpse into the world that existed while Egypt's political and religious system was changing. But then comes another mystery. Why did the city disappear? Archaeological evidence indicates that the settlement continued to be used after Amenhotep III, including during the reign of Tutankhamun and the subsequent reign of I. That means the site wasn't simply abandoned immediately after its founder died. It remained part of the landscape during a period of extraordinary political change. And then, eventually, its importance faded. The settlement was abandoned. The buildings deteriorated. Sand gradually covered what remained, and thousands of years passed, but the most fascinating discoveries weren't necessarily the largest ones. They were the ordinary objects. Pottery, tools, jewelry, amulets, production areas, everyday architectural spaces. These things don't tell us what a pharaoh wanted people to remember. They tell us something much closer to how people actually lived. And that matters because much of ancient Egyptian archaeology has traditionally been dominated by spectacular places, tombs, temples, statues, and royal monuments. Those structures survived precisely because they were designed to survive, but ordinary settlements are different. Mud brick buildings disappear. Walls collapse. Objects are moved. Cities are rebuilt. And later generations often build directly over earlier ones. So when archaeologists discover a settlement like this, they're not just finding another ancient monument. They're recovering pieces of everyday life. The baker, the craft worker, the administrator, the person making sandals, the person preparing food, people who would never become famous enough to have their names carved into the history books. Yet they were living through the same events that shaped the Egyptian empire. That's what happened here. The team went looking for a royal temple. Instead, they found evidence of the people and infrastructure surrounding Egypt's royal world. And that may be the most important part of the discovery. The rise of Aten doesn't just add another location to a map. It helps fill in the enormous gap between the monuments we recognize and the society that built them, because a civilization isn't only its kings. It isn't only its temples. And it isn't only its tombs. It's also the streets between them. The workshops. The kitchens. The homes. The people who made things, moved things, built things, and kept the entire system running. 3,000 years later, those ordinary traces are helping archaeologists reconstruct an extraordinary period in Egyptian history, and perhaps that's the real lesson of the lost city. Not that an entire civilization somehow disappeared, but that even in one of the most heavily studied archaeological landscapes on Earth, the ground can still contain stories nobody has fully understood yet. The ancient Egyptians left behind monuments designed to make sure we remembered their rulers, but sometimes, the most revealing discoveries are the places they never intended to become famous. A street. A workshop. A home. A city beneath the sand. And suddenly, history isn't just something you see carved into a temple wall. It's something you can walk through. If you want more stories built around real archaeological evidence, without invented conspiracies or exaggerated mysteries, that's exactly what we'll be exploring here.